Since the tragic death of Charlie Kirk, many people have been saying we need to watch the way we speak. We need to make sure we're not stirring up hatred. We've got to keep discussion respectful. Listen and accept other people's points of view. Seek mutual understanding. Lots of people have been saying that, but not the national newspaper. Just listen to this that they've published about Charlie Kirk. Headline: Global reaction to Charlie Kirk shooting is whitewashing his extremism. This is written by Ellie Gommersall, a Green activist and candidate. He is quite likely to be an MSP after the next election. It's very possible. So here we go. Let's see what Ellie has to say. Hugely influential American far-right activist Charlie Kirk was murdered this week while speaking outside a university in Utah, and the repercussions will be felt for decades to come. Far-right, not accurate. Anyway, both the US administration under far-right President Donald Trump and the far right on the ground have already begun using this murder to justify huge political repression of the left in the US. That's pure fantasy, delusional fantasy, no foundation in reality whatsoever. Okay, the simple fact is that Kirk's views and actions were nothing short of reprehensible. He was a blatant racist. Lie. Downright lie. He despised people of colour. Downright lie. Absolutely untrue. You'll see time and time, you'll see videos of him where, a black person will come up and they'll try and say, why do you hate me? Why are you a racist? And he'll say, I'm not. I want to treat everyone equally. I've got respect for everyone. But why should the facts get in the way of a incendiary article like this? Right, so despise people of colour, a total lie. And he said, we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. That ended discriminatory laws in America. So this is presented as though he was saying, no, we should have kept those discriminatory laws. But he wasn't saying that at all. He was saying, yes, we should have got rid of the discriminatory laws, but there were some details, there were some aspects of the Civil Rights Act that he thought were a mistake and led to some problems in race relations further down the line, it's quite a controversial thing to say, but it was definitely not what the impression that's being given here. He called George Floyd, who was murdered by the police in Minneapolis, a scumbag. Well, okay, George Floyd was hardly of upright character. And Charlie Kirk obviously made reference to that. He was a misogynist, that's a ridiculous thing to say, who said women should not work but instead serve their husbands and raise children. Totally misleading. Charlie Kirk would say he thinks that women will find most purpose and fulfillment in the home being mums rather than being out working. Okay, and he very much encouraged women to do that, but he's not saying anyone must not work or anything or any sort of coercion like that. He's just giving his advice about what he thinks is going to work out best for women, best for families, best for society in general. He said that if his 10-year-old daughter was raped and became pregnant, he would not allow her to have an abortion. He believes in the sanctity of life. He doesn't believe that you can kill innocent human beings for reasons of convenience or whatever. So he sticks to his principles. He said that trans people like me, okay, Ellie, of course, is actually a man, which we'll come on to that later to explain this hatred spewing out of him. He said that trans people like me should be taken care of the way we used to in the 50s and 60s. Now, what does that mean? I mean, no one's quite sure what that means, but it probably means, if a man was in the women's changing rooms, they'd just be dragged out and thrown outside. Probably means something like that. Okay, that's something that you're not quite sure what it means. But if someone speaks for thousands and thousands of hours, you're going to get some clips, some snippets of what they say. Think, not quite clear what that means. Does that mean? What doesn't it mean? I don't know. But I think that's probably what he had in mind. He says, he heralded Bible verses which suggest gay people should be executed. He once quoted the verse from, I think it's Leviticus, where it talks about homosexual sexual activity and the death penalty. He was citing it to point out the moral standard that homosexual sex is immoral in God's eyes. He was not suggesting that there should be the death penalty with it. I mean, that's quite an obvious, basic principle of biblical interpretation there. But this is deliberately misrepresenting what he was saying, as though he was supporting the death penalty for gay people. Right, this was a man whose rhetoric directly contributed to the rising violence against people of colour, women and queer people, both in the United States and globally. He has blood on his hands. Utter rubbish. He did not contribute to rising violence. He spent his time in dialogue. Okay, sharp, entertaining, challenging, punchy dialogue. But to suggest he was inciting violence, absolute nonsense. If you want to see inciting violence and stirring up hatred, you need to look a bit closer to home, Ellie. Saying, but you wouldn't know it from the global reaction to his death, with so many reactions ignoring his extremist views at best, justifying them at worst. Now just listen to this next sentence. Listen to this. This is what Ellie writes, I assume with a straight face. Nuance often seems impossible in modern politics. Nuance. So Ellie thinks that he is the man who's showing nuance, showing a subtle understanding of the situation. But it shouldn't be impossible to condemn Kirk's murder while refusing to contribute to his martyrdom by whitewashing the atrocities he supported. Atrocities he supported. He supported no atrocities. Absolute downright lie. Again. Right, next one. The far right in the US have been quick to blame Kirk's murder on the political left. Well, yes, that does seem to be the case, and generally, if a right-wing figure is assassinated, you generally assume that it probably was from someone from the other side of the spectrum. But it does seem to actually be the case that someone from political left. Steve Bannon said, we're at war in this country. Elon Musk said, if they won't leave us in peace, then our choice is to fight or die. It couldn't be clearer that the American far right are gearing up for civil war. Now, Ellie, I sort of agree with you on this point. What Steve Bannon and Elon Musk said there is inflammatory and unhelpful to say, oh, this is civil war. Because that sort of hot-headed talk can lead to huge problems and violence. So I absolutely agree. But they're not Charlie Kirk. Okay? Right. So as far as Ellie's concerned, she thinks things are even worse here. Even more disturbing, though, were the comments of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who said Charlie Kirk has been killed not for espousing extremist views, because he didn't. He's been killed for saying things that used to be simple common sense. He's been killed because he had the courage to stand up publicly for reasonable opinions held by millions and millions of ordinary people, both in the US and Britain. Ellie goes on to say, this is nothing short of sickening. Kirk's views would have people like me murdered just for living my life in peace. Right, I would say that this is getting close to like incitement to violence. If you're saying he's trying to kill me, he's trying to get me killed, then how are you supposed to respond to that? How do you respond? Surely, if he's trying to kill you, maybe you need to get him first and kill him first to save your own life. Maybe that's justified. I mean, this is beyond the pale. Kirk's views would have people like me murdered just for living my life. How can the national newspaper print this junk? But it just shows the national newspaper is beyond the pale. It's full of left-wing extremists that should be in a total embarrassment to the cause of Scottish independence. Anyway, moving on. Kirk's views would see the mass repression of anyone who isn't a straight white man. Absolute rubbish. His views were as far from reasonable as you can get, and Johnson's support for them is reckless and deadly. So Boris Johnson saying, Charlie Kirk said some things that were common sense a while ago, and lots of people agree with him. That's deadly. A lot of the things that the controversial things that Charlie Kirk said, a substantial majority of them, I agree with them, and I say the same. So this person is going to be an MSP very possibly next year, probably thinks that my views are deadly. So thinks that I am deadly. I am a risk to the life of other people. It's quite concerning, isn't it? Okay, let's carry on. When views like Kirk's become normalised and we refuse to call them out for what they are, it opens the door to fascism. I mean, surprise, surprise, we knew where this was going, didn't we? And with the far right itching for violent retribution against those they deem to be their political enemies, it's a melting pot that could result in deadly consequences. So he's saying there's extreme views abroad and this might lead to violence. Whereas Ellie, what's he doing? He sees himself as, he's trying to calm things down, just lower the temperature. Really? It was the Reichstag fire, blamed on German communists, which allowed the Nazis to gain full control of Germany in the 1930s. I'm deeply fearful that Kirk's death will result in a similar escalation in the far-right stranglehold on US and global politics. In other words, people like Charlie Kirk, they're sort of Nazis, you know, they're like the Nazis. That's a good parallel to draw, just like the Nazis. So Charlie Kirk, who talks about sanctity of life, promotes family life, value of marriage, I mean, this sort of thing, says it doesn't think a man can become a woman, opposes homosexual relationships and thinks they're immoral. I mean, they're the controversial views he's got. I mean, that's what really brings down the hate on him. So Ellie thinks that these views are Nazi, justifies labelling someone as a Nazi. Once you've started to justify fascist beliefs, that's a floodgate you can't reclose. Well, talking about fascist beliefs is total nonsense, but actually a floodgate you can't close. Well, you can actually. There have been fascist beliefs in different parts of the world, and there has been closed and it has been brought to an end. So what shall we say about Ellie? Why is Ellie so full of hatred and extremism and just lashing out with falsehoods about someone who'd very recently been murdered? Here's one theory. I mean, Ellie is a transgender person. He's a man, but he's trying to live as a woman. Now, that must generate a lot of tension within a person, and you're trying to live according to a delusion, according to a lie, and there are people in society who won't go along with you, and probably that makes you really angry, and you absolutely hate them for it. You're furious with these people who are interfering with the delusion that you're trying to, the bubble that you're trying to live in. Okay, and so is it possible that Ellie's got this absolute hatred of people who don't go along with the ideology of transgenderism, and that hatred is seeking justification? In other words, you think, I absolutely hate these people, there must be a good reason, I've got to find a reason for feeling as full of hatred as I do. And so he looks for reasons and basically makes them up, finds reasons that don't really exist and seems to believe them. And also, he wants other people to share in his hatred of people with traditional values, Christian values, social conservatives like Charlie Kirk. Now, does Ellie really believe what he's saying? That's a difficult question. Is it possible that Ellie is so unintelligent that he really thinks that this is the genuine meaning of Charlie Kirk's statements? It's difficult to believe. Is it deliberate? Does Ellie look at the statement and think, right, I know what he meant, but I am going to deliberately misrepresent it and claim that he said things that are totally different than anything he ever said? Is it deliberate like that? I don't know. Is it that Ellie is so blinded and so convinced that people such as Charlie, so more conservative views, more right-wing views, that they're so evil that you can just jump to the worst possible conclusion because we already know they're really evil. So whatever terrible conclusions we jump to without evidence, they're probably true in any case, so let's just put them out there. Which is it? I don't know. I really don't know. But what we've got in this article is an example of far-left extremism. And Ellie is demonizing, misrepresenting, lying about a political opponent. The idea of debate, civil debate, exchange of ideas with someone like Ellie, no chance. No chance. So I believe this article in the National is stirring up hatred. It's stirring up hatred against people who hold views like Charlie Kirk, which I share a lot of his views, not all of them, not on, say, guns or Ukraine or whatever, but in terms of his Christian values, social conservatism, I was totally on his wavelength. And Ellie here is stirring up hatred against people holding those views. I would say to the point of stirring up violence. If you're saying these people are murderous, then what's an appropriate response? Well, violence seems justified when you're faced with people trying to kill you, allegedly, doesn't it? So yet again, the National so-called newspaper shows itself for what it is. Now, if I was in charge of the Better Together campaign, who is trying to promote Scottish unionism as opposed to nationalism, what I would do is I'd have a fundraising campaign, and I would get the money together to have the National newspaper delivered to every house in Scotland for a couple of years. It would put off the mainstream from Scottish nationalism like nothing else. Now, the National has done this ridiculous hit piece full of total lies about Charlie Kirk, just days after he was murdered. But I mean, they did the same to me years ago. They did an article, and a few times since as well, full of total lies to try and demonize me, trying to make out I said things that were nothing like anything I'd really said. You can watch the video. It's at the end of this one. I'll put it on the end screen. It's called Shock Horror. Richard Lucas says very bad things, apparently. So just remember, after the election in May next year, Ellie Gommersall might well be a member of the Scottish Parliament. I mean, we can despair, can't we? I mean, someone like this, a hot-headed, dishonest extremist, is likely to get elected. I just hope there's enough people who look at the Scottish Family Party and say, these people have got good values, they treat people fairly, they don't lie about people, they try and be balanced, and they've got true, good values. We're going to vote for those. We're going to get those people in. I really hope so. I really hope so. Maybe we'll get one of our people in instead of Ellie Gommersall. Wouldn't that be great? So, thanks for watching. Do join the Scottish Family Party if you want to support us in our mission. And good night.